Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Stanley, their part number 340. This is a 340 right hand and a US3. This is comprised of a bottom set of pivot, a top set of pivots. These are specifically right hand. These plates are manufactured in such a way that do make them right hand. And they're handed hardware, so you have to order them for the proper hand of door that you're working on. And we'll just do a quick visual review. This would be the floor portion of the pivot set. This is a right hand set that we're doing, so from your perspective the door would be here and swing out this way. If it was swinging out, we'd call it a left hand reverse, but you would use a right hand pivot for that. That's what it looks like when the doors open at 90 degrees. This is your floor here. Door swings back closed. Okay. Then we have our top portion here as well. Door swings out to 90 degrees. Take a closer look at that. I was just studying the small amount of play that's between the two leaves. Really nothing to pay any never mind to, because when both leaves are attached, the important part is that there's no lateral movement at all, and there's none. There's a little bit of wobble like this, but your door is not going to wobble. These plates do get separated and put back together. That's what your top pivot's going to look like. This is obviously in US3 polished brass finish. This is indeed made of steel, okay, with a polished brass plating done on it. Now, it's also going to include screws. You're going to have some different length screws here, and those different length screws, you're going to have... That screw just jumped right out of the end. We're going to put a piece of tape on that right now. Don't want that to get to the client and him being or her being a screw short of a proper installation. Okay, so you're going to have some short screws and then some longer screws. The longer screws are certainly going to be for the floor. Those are intended to go through that 3/4 inch block that they mentioned. The shorter screws are going to go up through the header. They certainly look like they're number 12 screws, possibly 5/8 long and maybe 3/4 long. Put a little tape measure on it. The floor screws are 1 inch. The header portion screws are 3/4 inch. Yeah, 3/4 inch. So there's some documentation down below this video, and let's just get into it. The first link is to the product catalog, which is very handy because that will allow you to review all of the Stanley pivots that they manufacture, and they do have 4 different types, if I recall correctly. The 340 is quite certainly the most popular pivot, at least the most popular that I sell. After that, it would be the 327, and then finally the 341 and 342. The difference, as you can see there, is literally how the parts are assembled and manufactured and ultimately get attached to the header, to the door, to the floor, or to the jamb. Okay, depending on your installation, you might very likely, very realistically select one over another. The 340 is going to be the type that's going to mount to the face of a stop. Pardon me, the 340 is the type that is going to mount not only to the face of the stop, but it's going to mount to the top of the door. The bottom portion of that is going to mount to the floor, and that's a defining characteristic of a 340. Bottom of the door and then to the back side. Bottom to the floor and then to the back side of the door. Then the 341 is going to mount to the header and the top of the door, but that has a jamb leg to it. And the reason you would mount the bottom pivot to the frame, it's because you don't want to or cannot drill into the floor. A common application might be for that would be a flooring condition that is quite irregular. Like you might have a stone type of flooring in a home application where you can place the pivot down, but you're not going to drill into it because it's really not regular. Or you might have a flooring condition that you cannot drill into it, like you might have radiant heating in the floor, and you can't drill into that at all. Or you might just not want to run the risk of damaging the floor by drilling holes into it. So you might look for a 341 in that event. The 327 and the 342, those are two interesting pivots. They're very interesting in the fact that they're basically identical, except the 327 is going to allow you to hang an 1 3/4 door up to 150 pounds, 1 3/8 to 1 3/4 door. So if you're dealing with a typical and common solid core wood door, you'd probably be looking at 327 type pivots. The 342 is a similar principle, but it's for 75-pound doors, and both of those last two are those that you are going to mount to either a mounting strip or to a stop, or to some sort of provision in the frame. They're calling it a mullion here. Yeah, you could certainly install them down to a mullion if you had a closet of 3 pair of doors. You're going to need a couple of mullions in there that you're going to attach your hardware down to. So it's going to be a vertical structure that you're going to hang your doors off of. Okay, if you use your mind's eye to figure your 3 pairs of doors, my next pair is over here. I've got this door swinging like this. So these 2 doors here, and then there'll be another meeting vertical edge like that. You'll need a mullion here. So either of those pivots will work in that instance. It is a very nice way to hang closet doors, is the bottom line. And what's really great about the Stanley pivots is they're awfully inexpensive for what they allow you to do. Looking at the cut sheet is just really a regurgitation of what's on the catalog specifically for the 340. Would give you only the information for that pivot. Now let's get into the installation instructions. So this pivot can be used in an overlay, in an inset, or a recessed application. So overlay is when the door sits on top of the wall surface or the structure. It doesn't fit in flush, or it doesn't fit in and then get recessed in. It is overlapping the outside area. It can sit where the door is flush or inset, so that there's a continuous flat surface from walls to door. You can then take that and recess it into the opening, which I have to admit I don't see that often, but you can see that for purposes of needing to have a door not swing so far and encroach into the space that it's swinging into. The installation instructions are based on a right-hand version of the 340, which just happens to be what we have. A left hand would be literally opposite. So installing these are really easy. I would recommend having a router. I would recommend having a drill, the proper set of drill bits with a drill index. I would recommend having all the tools you need to trim the doors: planer, circular saw, palm sander, pencil, Plumb Bob. You're going to need a Plumb Bob, you're going to need a Plumb Bob. So step 1 is defining how you'll use it. I would say that inset is the most common. Well, overlay or they call it flush. Flush or overlay would be the full inset would be the best way to call inset or flush. Step 1 defines those terms. Step 2 talks about so the minimum important thing, the minimum stop height recommended is 1.5 inches. And what that means is, let's make a couple of sketches here. So you're going to have probably some 1x material up in the header, and then what they're saying is the minimum stop height is 1.5 inches. Okay, so they're basically saying that is what you're going to need. Your door is going to reside in this area here, and that's because you need to be able to fit that entire back plate onto there. Okay, that's whatever dimension it is, 1.1 let's say, but they're going to need some room so you don't split the wood. So that's important to note immediately. You don't need to have a stop on the vertical side should you not want that. So be mindful of the fact that you're not restricted by it. Now, a lot of people would like to possibly use a touch latch with such installation. So immediately incorporate a touch latch concept into how you're going to install this, because the requirements of a touch latch between the face of the door and the face of the stop in the closed position are atypical. You need to be able to push the door in so the latch can then release the door. And you have to have a certain distance between the face of the stop and the door for that to be permitted. And that would not be out of the box accommodated in this application. You would need to, most likely, and I've never tried to stick a touch latch with a Stanley pivot together, but it strikes me as two common items. You might have to pad this off of the face of your stop a skosh for that to work. So be mindful to study all of those parameters before you start hanging doors and say, oh, I want a touch latch. May not be that easy. For flush or step 2, for flush or recessed door application, determine the desired clearance, usually 1/8 inch, between hinged side of door and side jamb. Mark the clearance with a vertical line on the stop. That is easily shown in step 4, where they're saying from the jamb over to where you're going to place the hardware and the door, that should be 1/8 inch. And marking the stop is going to allow you to visually understand where the material is going to be installed. Assuming the door is going to be, the hardware is going to be flush with the end of the door, not necessarily at all. Step 3 does show it drawn differently, certainly. But you're going to put an 1/8 inch vertical line on that stop so that you can understand where the door has to be positioned when you start to get it installed. And that is a relationship to the top plate. And when you put that screw through the elongated hole, you'll be able to move the door so that you get it into position correctly. So the bottom line is mark the face of the stop. So now we're going to talk about the bottom preparation, where you need to provide blocking underneath the floor pivot. Now, most people are putting these installation instructions are. I wish I had a. Oh, okay, sure, okay, makes sense. So the publication date is 1975. So they make a lot of reference to carpet. Yeah, shag carpeting is what they're referring to. Carpeting in general, but of course thick, long carpeting. People nowadays are putting them down to hardwood floors, so there's not going to be the provision of needing a block. But the bottom line is plywood block at hinge only to accommodate floor leaf. You would think Stanley would have well, here's a 1970s version of our installation instructions. So if you have shag, use these. And if you have hardwood floors, welcome to the modern world. Use these instructions. Plywood block at hinge only to accommodate floor leaf. Block thickness must be 3/4 inch minimum to accommodate the screws, and that's where those longer screws come in. If applied over a flooring material other than wood. Thickness of block should be determined by thickness of carpet or other floor covering and clearance desired. Height of door opening from top of plywood block to top of stop, assuming mortised hinges, door leaves only, equals door height plus 3/8. Non-mortised hinges, opening height equals door height plus 3/4 from same 2 points. So they're saying from the top of the plywood block to the underside of the header, if you're going to mortise the leaves, it's going to be that dimension less 3/8. And you're going to have 3/16 at the top, 3/16 at the bottom. Okay, so let's just assume that our hardwood floor is our plywood block. It's just a really elaborate plywood block. Okay, so that's how you would simply translate that. Now, if you're going to surface mount the hardware, and I would encourage you not to do that, you're going to allow 3/4 inch, and that's because you're literally allowing for, you know, the thickness of the plates, which would not really be an elegant way to go. All of this material, and then all of this material. It's better shown here, I guess. All of that. You're allowing for all of that. Obviously, if your floor is not level and you get your door out to 60 degree and it starts rubbing, yeah, that's a problem. You might need a block in that sort of case, because you don't really want to belt sand the bottom of your door. So now you know how to trim your door in the height. Going back to the 1/8 of an inch margin, yeah, you're going to assume an 1/8 of an inch from the hinge jamb to the edge of the door. Okay. And let's take a look there. Let me pull that up again. Yeah, sure. So in step 2, for flush or recessed door application, determine desired clearance, usually 1/8 of an inch between hinge side of door and side jamb. Okay, so you're obviously going to want to have a balanced margin between the two doors. If you have pairs of doors, you're going to want to add, you know, your 1/16 of an inch to each door so that you have an 1/8 of an inch there. So you would, in that sort of, in a pair of doors, you would run each door to a 13/16 size. So rather than, if you had a single door at 35 3/4, 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, the 36-inch wide opening. If you did a pair of 36-inch doors, make each door 35 13/16. That'll give you an 1/8, an 1/8, and an 1/8. Now, step 3 shows our place edge of stop leaf along the vertical clearance line. Okay, so they're saying put that piece of hardware along that edge. Not going to run that all the way long. Mark the elongated hole. So now what they've done is they've taken this threaded nut. You know that this is the top because that's the threaded nut, and they've separated the two leaves. You'll be able to work them loose. Okay, now we've got just this piece. 1/8 of an inch margin. Mark the center of that elongated hole, and then in step 4, just tack it, or I would screw it. Pre-drill your hole and put your screw in there. Get it secure so that I don't see really the point of tacking it, because you're going to install it anyway, and you are in the right position. Plumb bob gets tied up here. You're going to run that plumb bob all the way down. You're going to leave that installed up in the header, and in fact, I'm not even sure why you don't permanently secure it at that point. Well, forgive me. You don't permanently secure it. I don't see why you use the tack. Use the screw in the elongated hole only. Now, back to the plumb bob. You're going to hang that plumb bob down off of this portion, and you are going to drop that down and leave that plumb bob sit right in the center of the vertical axis of pivoting, which is shown in step 5. You're going to get this placed onto the top of your plywood block, and you are going to open that leaf up. We're open at 90 degrees. Well, they're showing it at 180 degrees, okay? So you're going to position that. Plumb bob is coming right down here. Get a hole through the center of, get a screw through the center of the elongated hole. Plumb line from stud on stop leaf. Door leaf swung out of the way. You are going to mark or trace an outline of your bottom pivot. With the plumb bob centered on the bottom pivot pin, position the floor leaf on the wood block. Mark edges of floor leaf and center of elongated hole. Remove bottom hinge and drill lead hole for the elongated hole screw. So that's super simple. You're going to get one screw down into the bottom of there. Now what time to move forward into doing is prepping the top of the door and the frame. So we have our top door portion here, and they're looking for a 2.5 inch long mortise. It's going to look like that, actually. 2.5 inch long mortise. Okay, that looks spot on. You're going to prep it for 1 inch over here. Great. They're showing 15/16. Yeah, that makes sense. And so how you're going to mortise the door is going to be and where you're going to place all of it is going to be dependent on your door rabbet, okay, and where exactly you're going to place the face of the door in relationship to the outer wall if you're doing a flush installation. Mortising all the way to the back side of the door is something to do. So you're going to make that preparation work exactly in that sort of relationship. If you've got a thicker door, 1 3/4, that's not going to matter at all because where you are positioning the face, the front elevation of the door in relationship to the wall will be based on where exactly the pivots are placed in the header and at the floor to begin with. Okay, so that all makes perfect sense. Top door leaf, apply flush with inside corner of the door. Top of door mortise as shown on top and bottom of door if minimum clearance is required. So if you want that minimum 3/8 of an inch total overall margin, 3/16 is the minimum. 3/16 is the minimum at the top and bottom, I should say. Then you're going to mortise this 0.135, so this measures just heavy on 1/8 of an inch thick. And if you're going to surface mount the material, then you're not really doing step 6, except that you are getting those pieces attached to the door how they've shown. Now, the bottom leaf preparation is going to be the same dimensional properties that's going to be necessary, meaning that if I literally take that top leaf and place it on what is the bottom leaf, they're the same size stamping. So all of those dimensions are the same. Bottom leaf apply, so what they show here is bottom door leaf, apply flush with inside corner of the door. Bottom door leaf, apply flush with the inside corner of the door. Yeah, sure. So this is going to be flush with the inside corner of the door. They state, I don't know what that dimension is. I'm going to say 3/16 approximate chamfer on inside of bottom of door to accommodate door leaf bend. What they're saying is the bottom of your door, as it sits into here, you can see that this is not a 90-degree angle. There is a radius to that. You're going to need to chamfer that part of the door so that it will sit tight on the floor plate, on the bottom plate of the door, and on the back side of the plate itself. So a small chamfer will be required. Belt sander, sander kind of operation. Nothing doesn't need to be too sophisticated in that regard. I wouldn't, get out a tiny roundover bit to make that, although you could. Step 7, drill lead hole in center of the elongated hole previously marked and attach stop leaf with screw in the elongated hole only. Do not tighten screw firmly. Drill lead hole in the center of the elongated hole previously marked and attach stop leaf with the screw in the elongated hole. Do not hole only. Do not tighten screw firmly. Okay, sure. Leave it slightly loose. Now, at this point, you have the top leaf mounted to the top of the door. This is mounted up into the header. All of this is attached to the bottom of the door. At this point, you have, this is all attached to your door. You pick the door up. You take the top portion. You're going to approach it like this, like at a 90-degree angle or so, and make these two pieces get up in there. Get it up in there. Okay? Then at that point, you're going to then position your bottom onto your block as you've traced and outlined. And at that point, this is obviously a two-person job. One person's going to hold the door. I'm just going to put these two together. You then secure your bottom portion down to your block. Okay? At that point, you'll make any adjustments because now you're in the elongated holes. You'll be able to move the door laterally as a result of the elongated holes that we've installed all of this in. Be able to move that laterally. Okay. You'll also be able to then, when you get because you've attached the plates to the top of the door as well, but only, again, I didn't say this, but through the elongated holes, you'll then be able to, in the closed position, get those to move laterally as well, okay, because you've got this elongated hole here and the one down in the floor portion. So you'll be able to adjust not only the pivot hardware in relationship to the opening, but the door in relationship to the pivot hardware. So step 8, with the top and bottom door leaves attached and the door in the open position, fit the door in the opening as follows. Insert the top door leaf on the pivot pin of the stop leaf. Slide the bottom corner of door onto the wood block. Okay. Now, it strikes me that if you're putting this down onto a wood floor, you might need a little different approach by holding that bottom hardware off a little bit, getting the door into place and getting it shimmed into position, and then proceeding with the hardware onto the area that you've marked onto the floor. You know, if you've got a hardwood floor and all the hardware is attached, it's hard to, you know, I don't know how much you're going to be able to keep the door tipped out like this when trying to get that up over that pin. You might need to hold that bottom hardware off until it's in position. Step 9, position floor leaf on the marking previously drawn on wood block. Apply a screw through the elongated hole only, don't over tighten. Make final door alignment. Attempt by tapping the leaves that have elongated holes. Apply remaining holes, tighten all screws, and apply cylindrical safety nut to complete the installation. Safety nut must seat on threaded portion of pivot to ensure tight installation. The nut must not touch the top of the door leaf. Yeah, because what will happen is as you're cycling the door, it can seek to unthread that nut. So you're going to make sure that that's tight. Little slot there for it. So a relatively simple installation by a hopefully not too far beleaguered explanation of the material. It is these Stanley pivots have been manufactured obviously for decades. I've been aware of them for decades. I have sold them for decades. They are really great because they give the modern designer, the modern end user, the client, the sought-after concealed look. You don't see a lot of this hardware. I mean, you can imagine in your head, really all you're going to see is just the just the face of that. You know, you're not going to see a lot of hardware, so there's not much that you have to suffer when you do this hardware. And considering the fact that they have a 150-pound model, it's substantially less expensive than other options. No special treatment is required to the door as it's offset. The vertical axis of pivoting is off the face of the door. Robust, reliable, predictable, time-tested. People have ordered them over and over and over again. And I think for doing wardrobe closet doors, they're really a great option. There's more expensive ways to go. There's no question about it. Just not sure. I mean, yeah, you would go with another model, certainly, if you could not accommodate the 327's requirements of mounting everything to a mullion or to the stop face. You might want center hung. One provision that is possibly a shortcoming of the Stanley hardware is that there is no intermediate pivot. They don't have one of those. So if you have any warp in the door, there's no way to mitigate that. I don't really hear that being a problem. And actually, no one's ever called asking for a Stanley intermediate pivot for a 340. So that must be a good thing. Given the fact that this pivot hardware is really installed where there's, in these pairs of doors, there's just a mounting strip. There's really, and in fact, with a 340, you certainly wouldn't need it. And that's probably why the instance arises that there is no intermediate pivot, because I can put a bank of 4 pair of doors together. They're going to work superbly, and you're not really going to see much hardware. Okay, you can put some concealed edge pulls that you'll be able to pull the doors open. Really, really nice. I think it would work superbly. People buy them all the time. There is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Stanley products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Stanley 340 and a US3 right-hand finish, it's obviously available in left-hand. Other finishes, I know that it's available in satin chrome. It may be available in oil rubbed. Let's take a look. Satin chrome, polished brass only. I believe that I've asked Stanley to do special finishes in the past. I think they've been accommodating of those requests. So if you're looking for something else, it's Stanley. It's made of steel. They can plate it. They sure can. If you're looking for bronze, or if you're looking for oil rubbed, or if you're looking for polished chrome, I don't see why they cannot accommodate those requests. They plate hinges. But then again, keep in mind you don't see much of the hardware. Thank you very much.